Welcome back to Bible Shorts, episode 53, Jerusalem, O Jerusalem.
Now, remember in our last episode, we learned that after the death of King Saul on Mount Gilboa, two different men had been crowned king. David in the south, in the area called Judah, and Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, in the north. And there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker, and eventually Ishbosheth was killed.
Then, 7 years after David had been crowned king of Judah, the people of Israel in the north came to David and anointed him king over them as well.
So now there is just one king, not two. That's good, right?
Now David had been ruling from the city of Hebron, and he decided to take Jebus as the new capital of his kingdom.
When David and his men marched to Jebus, the inhabitants of that place, the Jebusites, said to David, "You will not come in here. Even the blind and the lame will turn you away," thinking, David cannot come in here.
This was because it was practically impossible to get into the city, which was on top of a very steep hill and surrounded by thick walls. But David figured out a way to get inside. Water for Jebus had to be brought up the hill from a spring down below. But there was a natural 45-foot vertical shaft that led up inside the mountain. And David said on that day, "Whoever would strike down the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft." So they did.
David then occupied the stronghold, and people now called it Jerusalem and the city of David. And David became greater and greater, for the Lord of hosts was with him. David built a palace, but he wanted to make Jerusalem a place of worship too.
Now the Ark of the Covenant had been sitting in the house of a man called Abinadab in Kiriath Jearim for almost 100 years.
David wanted to bring the ark to Jerusalem. And so all the people assembled, and the ark was put on a new cart with 2 men guiding it.
David and all the people were celebrating with all their might before God, with songs and with harps, lyres, tambourines, cymbals, and trumpets. But suddenly the oxen stumbled, and a man reached out his hand to steady the ark. And the man collapsed and died.
Everyone was frightened. Even David was afraid, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of God?" They were afraid because they didn't know why the man had died. Was it because he had touched the Ark of the Covenant? Or did he just have some sort of attack? Nobody knew.
So they left the ark nearby, at a house of a man called Obed-Edom, where it stayed for the next 3 months.
When nothing bad happened, and in fact the house of Obed-Edom was reported to be blessed by the Lord, David decided to try again. And after learning that the Levites should have been carrying the ark, that's what they did. Remember, Levites were the men who served the Lord as priests and in holy places.
And so the Levites, clothed in fine white linen, carried the ark. And when they had taken 6 steps, they stopped, and David made sacrifices to God.
The people brought the ark to Jerusalem with shouts of joy and the sound of ram's horns, trumpets, cymbals, lyres, and harps.
And David and all the house of Israel danced before the Lord with all their might, with songs and lyres and harps and tambourines and castanets and cymbals. Now, as the Ark of the Covenant was entering Jerusalem, one of David's wives, Michal, daughter of Saul, was watching from a window.
And when Michal saw King David leaping and dancing and celebrating, she despised him in her heart.
They brought the ark and set it inside the tent, the tabernacle tent that David had pitched for it.
David sacrificed burnt offerings and blessed everyone in the name of the Lord, and he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the crowd, and then everyone returned home.
When David went back to his palace, Michal said to him, "It was disgusting to see the king of Israel to behave like that, dancing and leaping in full view of the people, the slave girls, and the servants."
David replied, "I danced before the Lord, who chose me in place of your father and appointed me as prince over the people of the Lord. I am not ashamed to dance before the Lord and celebrate, and the people, the slave girls, and the servants will honor me for doing so." And Michal had nothing to say in reply. So what happens next? David defeats his enemies on every side of Israel, and things are going great. But then one day he thought to himself, "I live in a palace with beams of cedar, and the ark is sitting in a tent. I need to build a house for the Lord."
What happens next? Look for episode 54, The Lord's Message to David.